Welcome to Carolina Real Estate Insider, the podcast where we break down the news of the day affecting real estate in the greater Charlotte area. I'm your host, Realtor Kathy Smith, and today we're here to talk about the hidden secrets of homes, their condition. I'm sure we've all seen the viral post where there were snakes covering basement floors or houses sliding off foundations into the ocean. But let's get real. Are those exceptions, or can we save some money by just calling in a friend or our dad to check out a house before purchase? Today, we're going to get down to the brass tacks with our special guest today, the hero of every homebuyer, Andrew Matson from Pillar to Post Home Inspections. So you found your dream home, but before you sign on the dotted line, there's someone you need to meet. Your secret weapon, the home inspector. Andrew, why is having a home inspector like having a superhero in the home buying process?
Well, I'm no Superman, but I am extremely important when it comes to buying a home. Every single home, whether it's a home built 100 years ago or a home that's brand new, having a home inspector like myself to come in there and check everything from the structure to the HVAC, the plumbing, the electric, the roof, the exterior, so many different items, not only ensures that you are buying a proper investment for yourself, but that you're living in a safe and properly built home.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here, Andrew. So if we have a friend or family member who's familiar with construction or they've bought a bunch of houses, well, couldn't they just stand in and check out the property for you?
I mean, honestly, I'm never opposed to anyone that's qualified in the field to come and take a look at the house. It's always good to have multiple sets of eyes take a look at the property, but I'm a licensed home inspector in North Carolina and South Carolina. And really, when it comes down to it, the most important thing about the home inspection is what are you able to negotiate with the sellers? And if you just have your uncle or your dad come in there and do a visual inspection of the property, you can't send them an inspection report that's official from a licensed inspector like myself and be able to negotiate for any kind of repairs that you may want to have done. I find many different things from roofs that need replaced to air conditioners and furnaces to even structural damage that, like I said, Uncle Joe's cool to have along to call out a cracked rafter, but until it's in my official inspection report, it really doesn't mean all that much at the end of the day. Getting a license, and especially North Carolina, is a very difficult task because the state requires us not only to follow a specific standard of practice, but to adhere to a guideline that is extremely strict and set forth by this governing body. So we're not just looking at things to tell you in terms of defects, but also in terms of information that is extremely valuable to you as a home buyer coming into purchasing whatever property you may be looking at.
Absolutely. But I tell you what, let's shift gears right here and let's talk about the shiny allure of new construction. So many people believe that they're immune to issues. So in addition, since the county where they're being built has their own inspectors to check out the house, people feel like there's no need for an inspection. But Andrew, is that necessarily the case?
Yeah, so for new construction, really, it's a big misconception and the home buying process that brand new home, no problems. A lot of times people think that, yeah, I have these county inspectors that come in, they check the electric, the plumbing, the structure. But sometimes I come in there and I find the county inspector, he didn't climb all the way up into the attic. He didn't find a broken truss, or he didn't find a truss that was repaired but not done under the guidance of a licensed structural engineer. So having a third set of eyes or a unbiased third party like myself is extremely valuable when it comes to a brand new house, because not only do I find certain things that the county may not have found, but whenever you're trying to get anything taken care of or repaired by the builder, having an official home inspection report sent to them by your realtor like Kathy, I mean, it really spurs them on and they're going to get it done to the best of their ability, typically before closing. So that way you feel safe and you feel good and, have a peace of mind about buying this new construction home without any kind of issues.
Now, if I can interject here too, Andrew, there are actually talking about new construction inspections. There's two phases to it. You have the pre-drywall and then the final. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit about what happens on each one?
Yeah, sure. So the pre-drywall phase is basically the home has been almost built. We're in the rough-in stage, as we call it. So we've got the foundation, we've got all the framing, we've got some of the plumbing, some of the HVAC, and some of the electric built. Um, what I love to do is come in during this phase, and it's not nearly as expensive as a normal home inspection, but I come in and I look at all those different things before the insulation, before the drywall goes up, and I find a lot of things that would honestly be hidden once the home is completely constructed at that time. So it's extremely advantageous to have a pre-drywall inspection done because all the studs, the joists, the rafters, the trusses, everything within the home is able to be evaluated and checked. So that way, you know, not only are you buying a good home, but you're buying a properly built home.
Well, it's very true. I mean, how often do you get the opportunity to look behind the walls? I mean,
Exactly.
honestly.
Yeah, no, you're very correct right there.
Yeah. So, you know what? You've got me convinced on this one. So, there really is a need for a home inspector no matter what you're buying. You know, I've seen in the past some FHA appraisers come in and completely miss things that you've picked up on a home inspection. Um, but
Hmm.
but can you tell me some more about the technology? Let's talk about the cool tools. So, what kind of
Oh
things do you
yeah,
use in doing your job? I mean, you guys have really started using some different tech since 20 years ago when I first became a realtor.
absolutely. So as you said in the beginning, this is your superhero. I'm kind of like Batman with the
All the
a
gadgets.
belt and gadgets. Yep, exactly. One of my favorite pieces of tech is actually the infrared camera that I'm able to use. So I have different tiers of inspections, and the premium and the prestige tiers, they allow me to use an infrared camera that actually lets me look behind the walls. You may say, how is that even possible? But it actually picks up various different temperatures. So I actually just did an inspection yesterday. It was a big 4,000 square foot home. And there was a bathroom above and then a basement below. I ran all the plumbing upstairs. And when I went into the bathroom in the basement, there was no stain on the ceiling. But when I used the infrared camera, I saw a color difference. We call it a thermal anomaly. And then I went up there with the ladder and I hit it with what's called a moisture meter. And sure enough, there was a leak developed from the plumbing in the tub in the bathroom above that, like I said, had not developed a stain. So trying to think of other cool tech that I use. I've got the basics as well. You know, some things are tried and true and never have to be replaced, like a screwdriver and a tape measure. You know, certain things like that. But some of the really cool tech, not just the infrared camera, but also I have a laser level. So I'm not a structural engineer, but if I see a floor that's sloping or I feel a floor that's sloping, I can use a specific laser level and actually point it across and find differences within the floor and the wall. And I've called that out a couple times and actually been able to get a licensed structural engineer to come into the home, take a look at the property, and then after their evaluation, they're like, oh yeah, we've got some movement going on in this wall right here, this floor structure. Um, like I mentioned earlier, the moisture meter. So a moisture meter is a great tool. I have a pinless one where I don't actually have to puncture into anything like drywall or wood. And then I do have one that has pins in it so I can really actually get, deep into it. And the moisture meter, like I said, is great because, we have a lot of crawl spaces here in North Carolina. And a lot of times I'll go into a crawl space and I need to figure out what's something called the wood moisture content. And down there in the crawl space, if it's above 20%, that actually allows for mold or fungal growth to begin to grow. And once that continues to grow unchecked, it'll lead to what we call wood destroying fungi, where it eats away at the wood and the floor joists, the beams, the ledger strips, and also starts to invite unfriendly pests like termites. So that moisture meter is one of my greatest tools, and not just in crawl spaces where we have structural members, but even in the interior of the home. Like I said, the inspection I did yesterday is just a great example for this podcast. I mean, I literally saw a stain above a window in a basement, and it was an old home from the 90s with stucco on the exterior. Stucco sometimes has issues with moisture intrusion. I saw just two tiny little dots, and sure enough, I hit it with the moisture meter, and it was up to about 20% on the wood measuring. So any interior wood product should be anywhere from 8 to 12%, depending on the humidity within the home. But 20% shows that, yeah, we've got some moisture coming in. And because this is a window on an exterior wall, this is coming in from the outside. We potentially got a bigger issue where we need to get another qualified contractor in here. So moisture meter, one of my favorite pieces of technology. Also, an additional service that I offer is something called a radon detector. So It's one of these bad boys where I actually bring this into your house. And North Carolina and South Carolina, there are different pockets where we have certain areas of high levels of radon. And radon is a gas that actually comes into the home. And if it's within the home above a certain level, we call it picocuries per liter. That's the measurement. If it's above 4.0, you actually have to get a mitigation system installed. And the reason for that is because radon is actually the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States behind smoking. So it is a deadly gas. It's odorless, it's colorless, and the only way you would ever be able to detect it is through a monitor that I leave in the house. It sits there for 2 days or 48 hours, and I come back and pick it up, look at the results, and then I send you those and let you know about it. So those are a couple of different tools and technology pieces that I use that allow me to give you an extremely thorough and not invasive inspection, because I don't break through drywall, I don't open things up, but that's the beauty of some of these pieces of technology, is it actually allows me to look behind those places where I actually can't see visually with my own eyes.
Sometimes it's kind of funny. I've gone through houses where it's been under contract and then it's back on the market after a couple of weeks. So the home inspection's been done or the appraisal's been done and something's gone wrong with it. Well, when I see a house like that, sometimes I refer to them as being bitten by a vampire. And I know that's where somebody's put a moisture meter into the ceiling to test.
Oh, yeah. You see the fangs. Mm-hmm.
I see the little fangs there. But yeah, you brought up a couple of really interesting points, mentioning, stuff about the 20% moisture in the crawl space, or just moisture anywhere, 20% or higher. Termites are naturally occurring in this part of the world. Clemson University, their extension group did a study, and they said that 2 termites per quarter acre are naturally occurring here. So it's not, this house is going to be, not going to get termites. It's a matter of when, because you can't get rid of them. They're in the environment. You mentioned something interesting. That house you inspected yesterday, you said has stucco. Wouldn't happen to be IFS stucco. That's the EIFS stucco.
That had a lot of problems, especially when it was first implemented. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, builders said, what's a cheaper alternative to using hard coat stucco? And they developed EIFS, which is the exterior insulating facade structure. And with that, it seemed like a great product at first, but eventually they decided, or they figured out, that water was actually coming in at various different joints. And then once it was behind there, it had no way to get out. So the entire wall structure would start to rot. And if there were class action lawsuits, there were a lot of issues with that. So the home that I inspected yesterday, it had hard coat stucco, which is still a good product. It's still used today. It's a very popular product in southern states where we have a lot of moisture and stuff, like Florida. You'll see a ton of those. The thing about stucco, though, is that a lot of times what they'll use is that EIFS, or the synthetic stucco, for the trim around doors, windows, sometimes above the foundation line. And when I come in there, I'm looking for various different things, like certain levels of sealants, certain joints, and then most importantly, the flashing. Flashing, by definition, is any kind of material that we use to keep water out of the structure. Flashing is typically used the most on roofs. As you can imagine, we've got a roof meeting a wall. We want to make sure that water doesn't get into that wall there. So stucco, it's extremely important. When that roof structure ends and the wall continues, we install something called kick-out flashing, where we bend the aluminum at a 45-degree angle and we kick the water out so it doesn't get in behind the wall. The stucco yesterday at the inspection I did was actually in really good shape. I used that infrared camera and I scanned every single exterior wall. I scanned every window, scanned underneath all of the ceilings, around all plumbing fixtures. But the stucco was actually doing a good job. I did find a couple pieces of damage in various locations on the outside. The one thing, though, that where we found some of the moisture coming into the basement bedroom at the window, where I saw some of those stains, was a big portion of the EIFS below the primary bedroom window. It had a caulk line, and the caulk had not been resealed in years. So you had this big open gap, and water was just shooting right into that, going straight down, hitting the top of the window framing, and then collecting, developing the stain to where I hit it and discovered that. So if you find a stucco home, don't be afraid. Don't be, alarmed. If it's an EIFS home, you definitely want to get a professional stucco inspector to come out and do a thorough investigation. an inspection of it. But it is still a great product, and many, many homes are still standing today with that kind of exterior cladding.
Yeah, there's been some beautiful actually, I lived in a stucco home for 4 or 5 years. I absolutely love stucco.
Yeah,
But I've seen my fair
it's a
share of some
beautiful
scary
finish.
stuff. Yeah, if it's done right,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Um,
Hmm.
there was a house that I saw, in the Lake Murray side of things in Columbia, South Carolina, many, many years ago. That house today would probably be in the range, if we were here in Charlotte, probably 1.6 to $2 million dollars in price. It was
Hmm.
currently being offered. It was being offered at the time for $150,000, and
Wow.
curiosity got the best of me, and I was like, I have to go in and check out this house. And so I ran in and took a look at it, and mold everywhere. Go figure. And it was all IFAS, or EFAS
Mm.
as you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And so for instance, I went into the garage, and the garage, like around the windows, just like you're talking about, where there was water intrusion, and
Hmm.
the EFAS was actually pulling away from the wall, and it was just crumbly. And when I looked inside, there were termites everywhere. So
Oh,
yeah, so
geez.
for this poor house, it was a beautiful house. I mean, it was built
Hmm.
probably late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
So the best thing that could happen to that house is for it to meet a bulldozer, and I'm sure by this point it probably has.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to repairs for something like that, you're looking at 150, $200,000 of removing all of the exterior cladding, sometimes replacing all of the OSB sheething, some of the studs, the structure. I mean, at that point, it's like, let's knock this bad boy down and just rebuild it
Yeah.
properly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're best off to do that. But Andrew,
Hmm.
I'm obviously a huge fan of pillar to post, but for those who may be in the audience thinking about hiring a home inspector, let's talk about some tips for them to ensure they've hired the right person for the job to inspect their new home.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would always wish that everyone would always use pillar to post, but it's not always possible. If it's, you know, your first time buying a home, if it's your fifth time buying a home, whatever it may be, and you're trying to find a good home inspector, typically your real estate agent will be a great first source. They work with real home inspectors all the time, so they can give you a great recommendation. But say your realtor doesn't have a good recommendation or doesn't have a good relationship with the local home inspector, and you decide to venture out on your own and try and find one. Obviously, we all know how valuable reviews are. Looking at the different kind of not only reviews but levels of experience with home inspection. And I know I may look young, but I've been doing this for 10 years, and I actually was in construction since I was about 7 years old. So I had a great background, and my father trained me and everything. But a lot of times you'll see people that join into this field and they aren't, a construction person per se. So if you can, try and reach out to the home inspector, talk to them before you hire them or decide to use them, and ask them a couple questions. You may not have a whole lot of experience in construction yourself, but it's pretty easy to do a quick Google search and look at the top questions that you should ask a home inspector, and then really vet them on your own and figure out, do they really sound like they know what they're talking about? Are the different services that they're offering legitimate? How many things are they going to be checking within my home? I actually love when my clients call me and they ask me these questions, because I give them a full rundown. I don't care if it's a 15-minute or an hour-long conversation. I will go through every single thing that I'm going to be looking at, so they understand, the price they're paying for this home inspection is extremely worth it, because I may potentially find some things that are worth thousands to tens of thousands of dollars in terms of damages that you definitely want to find out before you buy a home. So look at reviews, talk to the home inspector if you can. If you can, the best way is getting a referral from another home buyer, someone that's bought a home that you may know, a family member, the realtor that you may be working with. If you're going without a realtor, then really do your best, because getting a bad home inspector may potentially be the difference between you getting a good home and a bad home.
Yeah, Andrew, and I can't echo that enough. There are several home inspection companies here in the Charlotte area that, after they've spoken with you guys to get a home inspection, that they decide they're going to go ahead and try to shop around a little bit. And so they'll call around. And so some of these other home inspection companies are like, how much would Pillar to Post charge you? I'll do your inspection for $50 less.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one case in point, and names will be kept private,
Redacted.
protect the innocent here. And they were
Of
really
course.
thrilled that they saved $50 on it. And they had the house inspected, and the radon test came back, and the test said that it was 4 picocuries of radon in the house. And needless to
Mm-hmm.
say, we all just absolutely lost our minds. They're like, wait, what? I didn't even hear about this area. It was in Lancaster, South Carolina. Was like, we never heard of, anybody having radon at those levels. And my God, why is
Mm-hmm.
the EPA not involved in this? Like a massive cleanup issue with radon, because everybody in that area must have cancer. Come to find out that when I spoke to the inspector asking him for more details, he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm kind of new at this, and I didn't know how to read the meter. It was 0.004. You're fine." What? Are you serious right now?
That is an egregious mistake.
That's kind
That
of a
really
big
is.
deal. I mean, because
Yeah.
it was not only, my buyers were really upset. I was really upset. The sellers were upset. The listing agent was upset, all because somebody that, didn't know how to read the meter. And that also kind of put some shade on the entire inspection report, because the buyers are going into that house now wondering, is there something else that they missed? If they can't read the
Absolutely.
radon machine, what else did they miss? So
Mm-hmm.
that's actually a pretty good segue into even though we did talk about the EFA stucco, we want some dirt. I know there's been some other stories, some other really wild things that you've seen in your years of home inspecting. So tell us about some spine-chilling discoveries that you've made that homeowners and buyers just had no clue about.
I mean, I remember one time I was up in Lake Norman, and up there we have a lot of big, beautiful homes, big mansions. And it was a 6,000 square foot house on the lake. So, huge. And the master bedroom leads into the master bathroom, and there's a big walk in ceramic tile shower. And I go in there, I run the water. I'm looking around, I'm like, this shower hasn't been, upkept very well. There's a lot of grout lines that are opened up. I sprayed the water against the glass that was connecting to the tile, and water leaked out. They haven't resealed it in a long time. And I had my suspicions, and I went into the crawl space, and I had never seen more rotted structural members, from the subfloor to the floor joists. And I mean, this was the one time that I went back into the home. The seller was still there. They were there during the inspection. And I said to the woman, do not take another shower in your master bathroom. I said, you are at a high risk of literally falling through the floor and finding yourself in the crawl space. Like, I go down there and I use an 18-inch screwdriver, and I probe into different structural members. And I did just one stab. I could see it, but I just had to feel it, and right through an entire joist, like it was paper almost. Like, that shower was held together by hopes and dreams. Yeah. So that's one great example is, finding a shower leak on a multi-million-dollar home where it's so luxurious and so nice, you would never expect something like that. I've also gone into homes, and I have found previous fires within the house that the seller did not disclose, where there was fire damage in the attic. I found many of times, old school wiring. And when I talk old school, I mean the first electrical wiring that we even used. It's something that we call knob and tube. And back then, we literally had electrical wires that were wrapped in cloth, and they would go through these porcelain knobs and tubes, hence the name. They had no ground wires. The cloth would deteriorate, and then you would just have an exposed electrical wire, which poses a huge, huge fire risk. And honestly, a lot of insurance companies won't even cover you if knob and tube is found. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually come into a home. The home was previously inspected, and the contract fell through. And I'll be sent the inspection report, and I'll take a quick look through it, and I'll go up into the attic. And the home was built in the 1930s. They used knob and tube. And I go up there and I find knob and tube, and I hit it with a voltage detector and find out that it's live. And it wasn't in the previous inspection report. And the thing about knob and tube is it's in the attic. Well, it's going into the walls, and that's feeding your lights, your receptacles, various different electrical items in the home. These 1930s homes and old homes like this sometimes have plaster on the inside. So It's not like drywall where you can easily cut into it and replace the wiring. You start to open things up and you start to replace that. I mean, I've seen knob and tube repairs get up to $35,000 because it's just so invasive and extensive. So, knob and tube is one crazy thing that I find a lot. And also another thing that people forget about is before we had natural gas and before we had, great technology with heat pumps, the old way of heating homes was not only using coal and a either coal-fired furnace or a fireplace, but oil-fired furnaces. So a lot of times I'll find homes built, 1970s, 1960s and prior, they will actually have an oil tank that is buried in the yard somewhere around the property. You may think, what's the big deal about that? An oil tank, sometimes those oil tanks, because they're made out of cast iron, will rust. And then that oil, if it hasn't been properly removed, will actually leak into the soil. And I've seen sometimes those repairs get up to $45,000, $50,000 because the EPA gets involved and they realize we've got oil leaking and leaching into the soil. That soil is allowing, after rain comes down, for it to run off into sewer systems. I mean, so many different bad things can happen from an underground oil tank that hasn't been properly checked or inspected or terminated. So, that's one thing that I'm not only always looking for, but when I find, I really hit it home with the buyers. I'm like, you have to get this looked at by a qualified professional and, either have it removed or properly filled to a point where we're not going to have a risk of any kind of oil leaching into the yard.
That's terrifying, Andrew. That, I mean, you almost have like a Superfund site going on there with the EPA in your backyard.
I know, yeah. Right.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about your largest financial investment, and things like that. That's pretty
Yes.
wild.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, there you have it, folks. The real estate world is full of surprises, and your home inspector is your trusty sidekick. A huge thanks to Andrew Matson from Pillar to Post for shedding light on the importance of home inspections. Don't play real estate roulette. Get a home inspection. So call Andrew Matson at Pillar to Post for your home inspections and, reach out to me for all your real estate needs. We're here to make your home ownership dreams a reality. Thank you for tuning in to Carolina Real Estate Insider. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and happy house hunting.